Last time we spoke about the invasion of Outer Mongolia and the First Guangdong-Guangxi War. During the Xinhai Revolution, Outer Mongolia declared independence from the Qing dynasty. Conflict soon arose between Mongolian nobles and Chinese authorities, leading to the formation of a provisional government under Jebsundamba Tuktu. Then the Russian Civil War led to the Russian encroachment of both red and white forces. Russian influence grew, particularly that of Grigory Semyonov's attempt to establish a pan-Mongolian state. Yuan Shikai seized the opportunity to invade Mongolia under the guise it was to thwart Bolshevism. While he did this to save face, it actually resulted in further conflict, this time with the Fengtian clique. Pai Fu and Zhang Zolin combined their cliques to face Yuan Shikai, winning a very unexpected victory over the Anhui clique. Yuan Shikai resigned from all of his posts in disgrace, and now the Anhui clique was a shadow of its former self. This episode is the First Guangdong-Guangxi War. Welcome back to the Fall and Rise of China podcast. I'm your dutiful host, Greg Watson. But before we begin, I just want to remind you all that this podcast is only made possible through the efforts of Kings and Generals over at YouTube. Perhaps you want to learn a bit more about the history of Asia? Kings and Generals has an assortment of episodes on the history of Asia, and so much more, so go give them a look over at YouTube. So please subscribe to Kings and Generals over at YouTube and continue to help us produce this content by checking out www.patreon.com/kingsandgenerals. And hey, don't forget about our sister podcast over at the Pacific War Week by Week podcast, written and narrated by me. And if after all that, if you're still hungry for some more history, why don't you check out my personal channel, the Pacific War channel over at YouTube. Over there I just released part 4 of my series about the Japanese invasion of Manchuria, this episode titled The Defense of Harbin. Also, please check out my Patreon account at www.patreon.com/thepacificwarchannel, where for as little as $2 a month, you get access to my Patreon exclusive podcasts. Pretty soon I am unrolling a rather long and complicated episode explaining how the century of humiliation, the very foundation of this podcast, influenced what is today's modern People's Republic of China. So if that's of interest to you, please go check it out. So we just covered the first major war in the north, the First Guangdong-Guangxi War. Out of all the books and even the first few YouTube videos I've seen trying to cover China's warlord era, typically they do the First Guangdong-Guangxi War. Then they follow this up with the First Fengtian War, the Second Fengtian War, and very rarely they cover the Anti-Fengtian War. Then suddenly everything jumps south into the Northern Expedition. The reality of China's warlord era, however, is that there really is not a chronological series of events. For those statisticians out there, the real nerd types, it's more like a horrifying ANOVA study. If you get that reference, we both share a certain amount of pain. Multiple military wars and political wars were raging across China, and they all affected people, events. It was causing a nightmare of incoherency. For this series, I'm going to try to do my best to do it in a chronological order, and stating that we're actually going to be jumping south today. Back to Yuan Shikai in 1915, when he was planning to proclaim himself the Emperor Walrus over the new dynasty, as we saw multiple provinces declared independence, some even actively rebelled. One of these provinces was Guangxi, with its viceroy, Luting, declaring open rebellion against Yuan Shikai. Luting had been appointed governor of Guangxi after the Second Revolution. Yet after Tai Le and Tang Jiao unleashed the National Protection War, Luting immediately bandwagoned. Some historians suggest Luting did this because he felt Yuan Shikai was overlooking him and actively preventing him from expanding his sphere of influence into Guangdong. After the death of Yuan Shikai, the new president, Li Yuanhong, appointed Luting as governor of Guangdong. But this certainly did not sit well with Long Jiguang. Long Jiguang was the current governor of Guangdong and a supporter of Yuan Shikai and the Anhui clique. He was secretly working in line with the Anhui clique, obeying the Beiyang government, undermining the national protection movement in the south. When his colleagues, such as Liang Qiqiao, Wang Chonghui, and Tang Xiaoyi found out they were the ones who asked President Li Yuanhong to get rid of him. Long Jiguang stated he was unwilling to resign his post, and this prompted Luting to dispatch Mo Rongqing, Ma Ji, and Tan Haoming to lead a Guangxi-based army to invade Guangdong, to get rid of this pesky rebellious governor, or I guess, better said, this anti-rebellious governor. Now, when Zhang Xun forced Li Yuanhong to dissolve parliament, Guangdong and Guangxi both declared independence. I think this must have been the fourth time they did so. It's hard to keep track of how many times the southern provinces declare independence, to be honest. When Zhang Xun restored the Manchu monarchy, this prompted Dr. Sun Yat-sen to sail south from Shanghai to Guangzhou to start a rebellion movement. Because Mr. Sun is going to Mr. Sun stuff. Dr. Sun Yat-sen planned to rely on the power of the southwestern provinces to rebel against the new tyrannical monarchy. Then, in a matter of days, Zhang Xun's Great Restoration failed, and Yuan Shikai became the de facto leader over Beijing, and his Anhui clique dominated the scene in the northern parts of China. Dr. Sun Yat-sen had planned for a political war, but Yuan Shikai dissolved all means of doing so. Now the only options were militarily. On August the 25th, a meeting was held in Guangzhou where Dr. Sun Yat-sen announced he was going to launch a northern expedition, with himself as the generalissimo. A new military government, or I guess you can call it a junta, was formed, and Lu Rongting and Tang Qiao were both appointed marshals within it. Many armies were mobilized in Hunan, Guangdong, Yunnan, and Guangxi. Respective cliques within these provinces all mobilized for their own reasons. One of these armies was commanded by Long Zhiguang, though much of his military strength had been depleted during the Second Revolution. All he had left was 20 battalions, roughly 5,000 men. There were several local militia-styled armies, such as the Fu Army, led by Li Fulin, or the 2nd Mixed Brigade of Huang Mingtang. But even with these added, Long Zhiguang could not hope to face what was coming his way. The armies in Guangxi and Yunnan were better organized, better equipped, and more numerous at this time. After the junta had been created, the Beiyang government took it as a threat, obviously, and began to put into motion plans to destroy it. At first, the governor of Chaomei, Mo Qingyu, was sent with military forces to disband the junta. He was decisively defeated by a coalition army commanded by Chen Bingquen, Shen Hongying, Lin He, and Dr. Sun Yat-sen. After this, Dr. Sun Yat-sen appointed Chen Jiongming to be the commander-in-chief of the Fujian and Guangdong army. Then Dr. Sun Yat-sen, through his ally, Zhu Qinglan, managed to transfer command of the 20th Battalion of the Guangdong Army to Chen Jiongming. Chen Jiongming took these troops and immediately attacked the Fujian governor, Li Huji, occupying Longyan, Jiangzhou, Tingzhou, and other areas along the Fujian-Guangdong border. After doing this, he proclaimed himself a defender of the area, and he began taxing the populace, being a warlord 101 basically. He established an independent base area in the eastern part of Guangdong and the southern part of Fujian, which was not cooperating with the old Guangxi clique. Now back over to Lu Rongting. Lu Rongting was running out of allies. He had backed Yuan Shikai, who was forced to give up his posts, and now Feng Guozhang and the Zhu Li clique were the big dogs in Beijing. Lu Rongting was unsure how to proceed, so he began publicly supporting Dr. Sun Yat-sen and the Guangzhou government. Lu Rongting then tried to dismantle the Guangzhou government through a reconciliation effort with the Beiyang government. Lu Rongting was basically turning everyone against Dr. Sun Yat-sen, growing the old Guangxi clique's influence in the process. Dr. Sun Yat-sen could see the paint on the wall, so he resigned from his position in May of 1918. An election was quickly held, seeing Sen Chun-chen, another old Guangxi member, become president over the Guangzhou government. But in reality, Lu Rongting was actually pulling the strings. In the meantime, Chen Jiongming over in his area was doing something similar by trying to negotiate a peace with Beijing. In 1918, Chen Jiongming was appointed by the Guangzhou government to be the governor of Fujian province in October. Chen Jiongming set up simple government agencies, actively maintained the social order, dominated by the local gentry, and vigorously built Jiangzhou's urban infrastructure, reclaiming some wasteland and developing modern education and industry. While he was restoring law and order, merchants gathered in Jiangzhou, and the market flourished. While he made Jiangzhou a sort of central government station, overall he was quite the anarchist in how he sought things to be done. By December, Chen Jiongming resigned, stating publicly, "My governorship over Fujian is in vain because we cannot feed the hungry, clothe the cold, and defend our army in battle. Fujian should be governed by the Fujianese. In December of 1919, Dr. Sun Yat-sen saw Guangdong was building an army, and he stated publicly, "Today's urgent task of saving the country is to pacify the Gui thieves first by unifying the southwest." Dr. Sun Yat-sen thus planned to return to Guangdong to attack the old Guangxi clique's forces. He ordered Chen Jiongming several times to send troops to help drive away the old Guangxi clique. However, in his words, Chen Jiongming made no reply despite repeated calls to urge the return to Guangdong. Zhu Jixin was dispatched 3 times to Jiangzhou with orders from Dr. Sun Yat-sen to urge Chen Jiongming to mobilize. He would finally write back to Dr. Sun Yat-sen, "Chen Jiongming's forces have exhausted all of their strength, and they are as tired as ever. At this time, the relationship has been hurt. It's useless to mobilize." Reading between the lines of these sorts of statements and messages, Chen Jiongming clearly had issues with Dr. Sun Yat-sen's politics, and he did not want to get involved at this time. Thus, until July of 1920, the old Guangxi clique was continuing to negotiate with the Zhuli clique officials, controlling the Beian government. They agreed to help expel Duan Shide and his Anhui goons, if the old Guangxi clique guys would help expel Dr. Sun Yat-sen's followers in Guangdong. On July the 14th, however, the First Anhui-Zhuli War broke out. Li Huji, the governor of Fujian at the time, expressed a desire to support the Anhui clique's military, and he requested Guangdong forces depart southern Fujian. On July the 15th, important figures in the fractured Chinese navy, such as Xu Xiaozhen and Li Qian, who both supported Dr. Sun Yat-sen, organized thousands of troops to fight the old Guangxi clique. Xu Xiaozhen became the commander-in-chief, and he led the forces to attack Guangzhou from 5 different directions. On August 11th, the old Guangxi clique mobilized their forces, thus beginning the Guangdong-Guangxi War, or also known as the First Yu-Gui War. The old Guangxi clique had roughly 70,000 troops, but they were by no means a unified force. There were the combined forces of Guizhou warlords, Yunnan warlords, and Zhejiang warlords. The Guizhou forces were led by Liu Zhulu, the Zhejiang forces were led by Liu Gongwang, and the Yunnan forces were led by Fang Xingtao. The Guizhou would attack Guangdong with the Zhejiang army on their right and the Yunnanese to their left. Guangdong, meanwhile, would have roughly 25,000 troops, led surprisingly by Chen Jiongming, who had a change of heart. He was also aided by Xu Changzhi and Hong Zhaolin. Chen Jiongming on the 12th of August had suddenly sworn an oath at the Jiangzhou Park condemning Mo Rongxin. Here is the statement. "Ever since Mo Rongxin and others have seized control over Guangdong, they have harmed our people in every way possible. The will of the people will be destroyed, the people killed and expelled, to that extent that they condone the robbers and beggars and soldiers that harass Yanlu, which is even more difficult to describe. The pain of our people suffered from the loss of their provinces was 100 times greater than the pain suffered by Korea, Annam, and Poland. They are naturally thieves. Seeking money and killing people is their usual skill. Recently, the bandits stationed in Hunan and Guangxi moved into Fujian to oppress our army. Their only intention is to hate the Cantonese people and to act if they are an enemy of the country. The Cantonese army today is fighting for the hometown and the country, and all of its factions and other issues are unknown. It is to swear an oath with tears and to tell each other sincerely, 'My fellow countrymen, please take this opportunity to learn from me.' All officers and men of the Guangdong army kowtow together." Chen Jiongming would also go on to accuse Mo Rongxin of, quote, "The Gui regards Guangdong as a conquered territory. Now that we are facing heavy troops, it is really unbearable. Although I am weak, I am willing to fight to the death." On August 16th, the main bulk of the old Guangxi clique forces had not yet reached the Guangdong-Fujian border. Thus, Chen Jiongming set up his headquarters at the Jiangji villages, leaving 20 battalions behind in Jiangzhou as a reserve. Chen Jiongming then took personal command of the central forces, dispatching armies led by Li Bingrong, Deng Binyin, Liao Xiaoxiang, Shonglu, amongst other officers, to attack Raoping and Chaoan from the direction of Pinghe. After this, they would break through Fengxuan and Shijin, coordinating with the left and right wing. Meanwhile, the left wing of Hong Jiaolin and Liang Hongkai led forces from Yunxiao and Jiaoan to attack Shanghai and Shantou, while Xu Chengzhi, commanding the right wing, attacked Jiaoling and Shantou from Shanghai. In all, around 82 battalions were engaging along two major fronts. The eastern part of Guangdong had been under Guizhou warlord rule for over 4 years when suddenly Chen Jiongming called for, quote, "the Cantonese people to govern Guangdong and implement democratic politics." The people there rallied to him, and with this, they would have a profound effect on the war area. The left Guangdong army then departed Jiaoan, quickly crossing the border where they defeated troops under Liao Zhulu, the commander of the major Guangxi army. After defeating him, they stormed the garrisons at Chaomei, Huanggang, and Shanghai, where they approached Shangtou. On the 19th, Yu Yiyang, the commander of the artillery battalion under Liu Zhulu, had already seized Shantou to declare independence and his desire to defect to the Guangdong army. Honestly, this is how most battles worked in the warlord era. Subordinate officers looking to dodge a real battle by switching sides, typically selling out their bosses in the process. This prompted Liu Zhulu to flee for Guangzhou. The next day, Deng Keng led the left Guangdong army to capture Shantou, and soon they were pursuing the Guizhou forces towards Zhejiang and Chaoyang. Meanwhile, the right Guangdong army crossed the border from Yongding to attack Danpu Sanhuba. Danpu Sanhuba fell on the 16th, and it would be followed the next day by Jiaoling. On the 18th, an entire day of fighting was seen near Meixian, where forces under Liao Daxing, commander of the Guangxi army, and the governor of Guizhou were defeated. Meixian was captured on the 19th, and Jingning on the 20th. After this, the forward Guangxi army had collapsed, allowing the Guangdong army to redirect itself towards Longchun and Huyuan. The army in Zhejiang watched the situation but kept out of it, while the Yunnan forces simply began withdrawing as it seemed clear the Guangdong forces were likely to win. Again, the Guangdong forces were outnumbered perhaps 3-1, but these types of battles and lesser wars were won and done by perspectives. Ye Ju was leading a central thrust for the Guangdong forces, quickly taking Chaoan and Raoping. As he advanced to Gaopo and Fengxuan, there he encountered real resistance. 6,000 to 7,000 men under the Guizhou clique general, Zhou Guiting, stood firm, fighting Yuzhi for 2 days. Then the left wing of the Guangdong army captured Shantou, and the right wing, the upper reaches of the Dongqiang River, prompting General Zhou Guiting to order a retreat. As his men fled, they reached the vicinity of Shigongchuan, where they were intercepted by Yang Kongru, leading another Guangdong army, who assailed them for a very long way. On the 26th, the Chaomei area in the eastern part of Guangdong was captured. On the same day, Dr. Sun Yat-sen proclaimed, "The Guangdong army attacked the thieves and recovered Chao and Mei in a few days. The speed of arriving here really broke the courage of the Gui thieves." This caused a major panic in Luting, who deployed his troops from Guangxi to reinforce the front. The Guangxi army mobilized the first army of Mao Ji, the second army of Lin He, elements of the third army of Shen Hongying, and the 1st Brigade Marine Corps of Li Genyuan, amongst other brigades who were sent to the front lines, which were now at Huyuan, Buliu, and Huiyang. The Guangdong forces continued their march, seeing the right wing take Laolong on September the 2nd. The battle along the front line was brutal, and it would last until October. Wei Bangping and Li Fulian, representing the Guangzhou government, attempted peace talks with the Guangdong forces, as the situation was looking increasingly bad for the old Guangxi clique. The old Guangxi clique dispatched police forces to crack down on newspapers, banning numerous publications that were critical of their war efforts. On the 13th of September, all newspapers in Guangzhou ceased publications, and any newspapers coming over from Hong Kong were confiscated for, quote, "publishing false military reports and subverting operations." Meanwhile, starting in early September, the Guangdong forces began working alongside the Cantonese people, chanting slogans like, "Cantonese people, save yourselves. Cantonese people, govern Guangdong." Heiyuan and the front lines were the gateway to Huizhou. To defend Huizhou, the Guizhou forces unleashed a month-long bloody battle. To help the war effort, Dr. Sun Yat-sen sent word to Zhu Jixin over at the Pearl River estuary to mobilize his troops garrisoning the Human fortress to rebel against the Guangxi menace. On September the 16th, Zhu Jixin managed to instigate a small rebellion. The commander of the Human fortress garrison, Zhou Weinan, declared independence from Guangxi, and during the mayhem that soon ensued, he was killed by a stray bullet. Despite this, the Guangdong army had won a series of victories, managing to launch a province-wide war to expel the Guangxi menace. Civilian forces were uprising against them. In late September, Wei Bangping, the director of the police forces for Guangdong, and Lu Fulin, the garrison commander of the Guanghe, also happened to be a former Old Guangxi clique member, covertly moved his troops to Xiangshen, Foshan, and other places to the south bank of the Pearl River in Guangzhou. There they declared independence of Hunan on the 26th. All the inland riverway warships and railway lines were taken, and soon a letter was sent to Mo Rongxing urging him to, quote, return the power of governing Guangdong province to the Cantonese people, and lead his troops back to the Guangxi to avoid military disasters. Then Wei Bangping and Lu Fulin led forces into Sanshui, taking control over the vital Guangshan Road, effectively cutting off the Guizhou army's supply line going from Xizang to Guangzhou. This was a heavy blow to the Guizhou army's rear and their ability to continue the war effort. During the same time, Huang Mingtang, the commander-in-chief of the Fourth Army, seized Leizhou. Jiang Renqi, the deputy commander under Wei Bangping's Fifth Army, raised a new force in Xiangshan, and Chen Dechuan, the superintendent of Jingxiang and the deputy commander of the Second Army, declared independence at Puyi. From here, Taishan, Xinhui, Kaping, Ongping, and Xuxi fell under civilian army control. Qujiang, Yingde, Qingyuan, in Beijiang, Gaoyao, Xinxing, and other counties in Xizang, and Xilian, and Xingya in the south all declared independence one after another. Within these dire circumstances, Mo Rongxin convened a meeting of over 30 representatives from the Guangzhou Chamber of Commerce, the Provincial Council, and the Public Security Association on October the 2nd. The representatives proposed Mo Rongxin step down so that Tang Yangguang could take his position and for the war to end as quickly as possible. On October the 14th of 1920, all officers of the Guangzhou Navy held a closed-door meeting in the Huangpu Park, where they unanimously opposed a new effort brought forward by Lin Baoyi, the commander-in-chief of their navy, to unify the northern and southern navies. On the 19th, workers of the Guangdong-Hankow Railway then launched a general strike, armed with pistols and explosives, which they used against the Guizhou army forces trying to use the railway lines. Over 30 schools in Guangzhou then formed a mass meeting about the entire debacle and what they should do. The principals of the schools proclaimed, if Mr. Mo does not leave Guangdong, classes will not be held in each school. Back over in the front lines, on October the 16th, the Guangdong Right Army finally captured Heiyuan, opening the way to Huizhou. Simultaneously, the central and left Guangdong armies captured Yang'an, Jiangpu, Langtang, Hengyi, and Sanduozhu, effectively pressing the battle towards Huizhou. Now, Huizhou is surrounded by mountains and rivers, making it quite easy to defend. Mo Rongxing concentrated the strength of his 40th Battalion there. At this point, the commander of the Second Army, Shi Chongzhu, fell ill, prompting Chen Jiongming to replace him with a man named Chiang Kai-shek. Chiang Kai-shek joined up with the Middle Army to begin a siege of Huizhou. The Guangdong forces would capture Huizhou by the 22nd. The next day, Chen Jiongming held a meeting within the city, and the commanders decided to march upon Zhengcheng, Shilong, and Dongguang in 3 different directions. After this, they would attack Guangzhou to finish the campaign. During the crisis, the populations of Bao'an, Sanshui, and other nearby cities began an uprising, lashing out against the Guizhou army. As Dr. Sun Yat-sen recalled, the strong people raised their flags and responded, while the old and the weak people welcomed them. This is quite the charm of the revolution of 1911. Within Guangzhou, civilians launched waves of worker strikes, school strikes, and general strikes. Mo Rongxin had run out of forces to fall upon. It was all falling apart for him. On the 24th, Lu Rongting, acting in the name of the president of the Guangzhou government, declared the dissolution of the government and the independence of Guangdong and Guangxi. The president of the Guangzhou government, Sun Chuanchen, fled for Shanghai. On the 25th of October, Shillong was taken. The next day, Dongguan fell, and finally, seeing the situation was all but over, Mo Rongxin cancelled the supposed Guangdong independence movement. On the 27th, Songcheng fell as Mo Rongxin had the Guangzhou arsenal blown up and the governor's seal was given to Tang Tingguan, who also fled the city. Yang Yongtai, the governor of Guangdong province, resigned via a telegram, handing his governor's seal to Wei Bangping. On the 28th, Chen Jiongming deployed his forces to Guangzhou and around the areas of Shougoling and Baiyun to try and catch the fleeing enemies. The three Guangdong armies gathered around Guangzhou, launching a general offensive together on the 29th. Mo Rongxin, after fleecing every department he could, fled with 10,000 remaining loyal troops west of Guangzhou, which was finally captured. On the 30th, Wang Jingwei and Liao Zhongkai sent telegrams to Dr. Sun Yat-sen stating they were going to appoint Chen Jiongming as the governor of Guangdong, to remove Lin Baoyi as the commander-in-chief of the navy and replace him with Tang Yangguang. Thus, on November the 1st, Chen Jiongming became the governor of Guangdong, and he remained the commander-in-chief of the Guangdong army. On November the 2nd, Chen Jiongming liberated the Guangzhou-Kowloon Railway, denying its use to Sen Chuanshen and Mo Rongxin. That same day, Xu Chongzhi paraded through Guangzhou to raise morale for the citizens. The newspapers reported, "The citizens rejoiced and rushed to set off cannons. Looking at all the situations, there was a sign of great joy." On the 6th, Tang Tingguang handed the governor's seal to Chen Jiongming, and then he sent a telegram dismissing the governor of Guangdong. On the 10th, Chen Jiongming was officially elected governor over Guangdong. Yet the enemy was still not fully defeated. The Guizhou army was retreating along the Xiqiang River, where they performed a scorched earth policy, burning and looting every town they came by along the river. They also set up outposts along the Xiqiang River and the Beijing rivers to prevent the Guangdong army from following. To rid the province of the nuisance, Chen Jiongming reorganized the entire Guangdong army into 5 armies. The first army was personally commanded by Chen Jiongming, who was also acting as commander-in-chief. The second army went back to Xu Zhongzhi, the third army to Hong Xiaolin, the fourth to Li Fulin, and the fifth to Wei Bangping. After resupplying, the Guangdong army marched west into 2 large groups to pursue the enemy to Guangxi. When the Guangdong forces entered Guangzhou, the Guizhou army first retreated to Jiaoqing because Wei Bangping and Lu Fulin seized control over the Guangsang route. The Guangxi army could only retreat from the Guangdong-Han road then. While under attack, the Guizhou army divided itself into 2 groups. The first one was led by Ma Ji and Shen Hongying, who retreated along the north Yuahan road. The other was led by Lin He and Han Saifeng, who headed further south. The Guangdong army pursued their enemy over both land and river, seizing Jiaoqing on the 15th. By the 21st, Lu Rongting ordered all forces still in Guangdong to return swiftly into Guangxi. And this effectively was the end to the First Guangdong-Guangxi War. On November the 28th, Dr. Sun Yat-sen returned to Guangzhou from Shanghai via Hong Kong and announced the reorganization of the military government. Overall, what would be the First Guangdong-Guangxi War had ended the old Guangxi clique. The old Guangxi clique was not down for the count, but they had severely lost face. Guangxi province was not the most developed one in China. It made it very difficult to raise funds and to keep an army going. Lu Rongting's ability to control and influence the old Guangxi clique began to dwindle. But it would only force him and others to perform an identical war against Guangdong in 1921. In desperation to maintain what little power they had. I would like to take this time to remind all of you that this podcast is only made possible through the efforts of Kings and Generals over at YouTube. Please go subscribe to Kings and Generals over at YouTube and continue to help us produce this content by checking out www.patreon.com/kingsandgenerals. And hey, don't forget about our sister podcast over at the Pacific War Week by Week podcast, written and narrated by me. And if after all that, you're still hungry for some more history, why don't you check out my personal channel, the Pacific War channel, over at YouTube. If you got a moment, please check out my episode on the defense of Harbin. Also, please check out my Patreon account at www.patreon.com/thepacificwar channel, where for as little as $2 a month, you get access to all my Patreon exclusive podcasts. In the grand scheme of things, it was another drop in the bucket. Yet it was extremely representative of the regular ongoings of China's warlord era. Wherever you looked from 1918 to 1928, regional warlords fought petty wars to control strategic regions, simply to further exert their own power. For the old Guangxi clique, it was a bitter lesson. Not that they had learnt from it, though.